Hour number 3 of the Stig Show on News Radio KKOB. Scott Stigler, Brandon Vogt. And it is time for our Turnaround Tuesdays segment. Not coined by me, but coined by my in-studio guest, Jeff Apodaca, who ran for governor against Michelle Lujan Grisham and Joe Cervantes for the Democratic nomination and did not win. So he is still trying to exert a little influence over the Democratic Party's policies.
A lot of our supporters didn't want us to go away, and we have over 38,000 followers on our Facebook, New Mexico Democrats for Democracy, which I partnered with after the campaign, or joined after the campaign, and we're continually pushing our policies and our issues.
All right, and we will do that here for the rest of the Tuesdays up until the week before Election Tuesday. All right, Turnaround Tuesdays with Jeff Apodaca here on News Radio KKOB. Scott Stigler with you. And today we're going to talk a little bit about economic issues and how to spur the economy here in New Mexico. So let me just kind of set this up, Jeff, by explaining, I think, sort of what this concept, the way most people can understand. A lot of people have their own savings, right? Some of it is in a savings account. Some of it is in a checking account. Some of it might be in an IRA. Some of it might be in different places. Some of that money is what they call liquid. You can get your hands on it immediately. You can go to the bank and withdraw money. Your IRA, there's a penalty if you want to get that money. So when we hear New Mexico is broke, in some ways that might be true, and not anymore because of the oil and gas boom, but in the past. But there's also some money that, we can't really touch. So let's talk about that and just give people a heads up on what money is out there that maybe not as liquid as we would like it to be.
To kind of put it in perspective, Stig, is, think about our state has a checking account, right? So that's an operational account that runs around $6 to $7 billion a year, runs things through it. Then we have a savings account, and that's the severance, not the severance fund. That's the another fund a reserve fund. That's a reserve fund that we may have on operational stuff. So think about it as a checking account and a savings account. And then we have a 401k. And the legislators and John Arthur Smith doesn't like me talking this way, but put it in perspective, it's like a 401k for us. It's for our future. We put money into it. We've actually had these funds since the 1900s. Our federal government made us put it together to be independent on our own, because they felt like back in 1900s, the state is not going to be able, the federal government's not going to support New Mexico forever. And here we are 200 years later, or 100 years later, still being supported. So what we've been talking about is where this money comes from. It's tax revenue and royalties from oil and gas and from our land leases. And over the 100 years, we have found oil and gas, minerals, mining, all that other stuff. So for years, we've been putting it aside. Now we spend a lot of it now, but those funds have grown. And the State Investment Council, which is a third-party entity appointed by the governor chairs that board, and the legislators and the governor appoints the board. There's 11 board members. Those 11 board members appoint a CEO, let's call it, and they manage our money just like any kind of firm would. And they've grown those funds, done a great job. They've grown those funds to 24.5 or 24 and some change $billion now. And our campaign and what we've been pushing our gubernatorial candidates about is in today's market in New Mexico today, there's over $3 billion of need in financing on private and public projects. And then we sit on this $24 billion, and of course we don't sit on it, we invest it. But we invested into Oklahoma, California, Wall Street, Europe. We invested all over the world. Out of the $24 billion, we invest less than 0.5% in the state of New Mexico. And our proposal is we need to stimulate the economy. And the number one issue when you look at jobs, the number one issue in our state is there's no private capital invested into our state. And so what I hear around the country is you guys don't invest into yourself. You don't invest in training people for those right jobs. You don't invest into your own startups. You don't invest into infrastructure. Why are we going to come and invest into your industry? We'll just pick off your companies, your medium-sized, your startups, and we'll just leave, we'll take them away from the state. So our proposal has always been, let's invest some of this money in New Mexico. Let's not spend it. Let's just reallocate it as we can by the state constitution. Let's reallocate it, invest some of it in the state of New Mexico. And on the campaign trail, I'm not crazy. I'm not sitting there going, let's invest $24 billion. But if you invest $1 billion of it, I believe the other $2 billion, $3 billion of private capital will come and invest with us. And now we have $3 billion investing into the state of New Mexico, and that will get the economy going. Now, you can look at Texas, you can look at Colorado, you can look at Kentucky. Many states have done this. And I always compare this. In Austin, Texas in the 80s, their number one issue was every UT grad was leaving the state. Guess what? They're going to California, starting their tech industry. Today, there's over 300,000 jobs in the state of Texas. A lot of them in Austin because of the tech industry out of UT grads. They invested into their technologies, into their startups, into infrastructure, and they kept those companies there. The most famous one was Michael Dell. I'm not saying he's the largest one, but Michael Dell was on his way to California. And they started with an investment fund of about $150 million. This was back in 1986, I believe it was. And so that's what I'm saying we need to do. We need to start investing back into New Mexico. And that's what we've been talking about is between these investment funds, the State Investment Council has done a great job investing outside our state, but we need to invest just 5%. And if we invest $1.2 billion of our money into small business, into startups, technologies, into different verticals that we talk about every day, those companies, our companies can grow, and those are going to create more and more jobs. And when you look at the jobs that we talked about 225,000 new jobs in the state of New Mexico.
All right. So let's lay this out because it's not one pot that has $24 billion in it. It's four different pots.
I believe there's 5 different investment funds. The largest one that everybody talks about is the Land Grant Fund, which is the fund that basically funds $1 billion of education.
And we hear that referred to as the rainy day
The
fund.
rainy day fund, right?
Right.
And I've never called it that. I made jokes about it on the
Right.
campaign trail, but
Right.
yes.
Okay. So that's got $18 billion in it. Can we take from any of those other 4 funds, Severance Fund, Tobacco Settlement Fund, which is $160 million, not a lot. The Water Trust Fund is $44 million, not a lot. And then this External Client Fund, $1.1 billion. Can we take from any of those without touching the Land Grant Fund, or are you suggesting take a little bit from each?
I'm suggesting we focus in on the Land Grant Fund and the Severance Fund. Now, by state constitution, the Severance Fund, we can actually invest. In the 80s, they changed the constitution on that. We actually can invest up to 9% of the Severance Fund in the state of New Mexico. Today, we do about 4%. So if you take it to the full 9%, that's about another $400 million that we can invest. And what we propose in investing it into verticals, into biotechnology, into cybersecurity, renewable energies, value-added agriculture, industries that we're starting here today automatically out of UNM, out of New Mexico Tech, out of Arrowhead. I'm on the board of Innovate ABQ. I've come in here and talked to you about that. The Innovation District we're doing down here. Governor Martinez, with the pressure from a lot of us in the business community and the support of the legislators, we finally got about $10 million, and then between the private capital, about $20 million. We're funding some startups, so there's a lot of startups, but we need funding between that first, second, and third level of the $2 to $3 million between the private sector. So that's what we're proposing is, and we're pushing our gubernatorial candidates to basically, and that was one of our major platforms because we think this will stimulate economic growth dramatically in the state of New Mexico.
Okay. So if we just look at the Land Grant Fund, $18 billion, and again, some people calling it the rainy day fund, even though you don't like that. I would make the argument that in New Mexico, given our economic situation, it's a rainy day. Okay, so I have no problem with calling it a rainy day fund and actually taking some money out of this rainy day fund because I think it's raining.
Right.
Okay, but here's where I may part company with you. My problem is that typically what Democrats want to do is they want to take from the rainy day fund and then they go, wait a minute, we didn't do enough. And so next year I want to take some more from it. And then I want to take some more from it and more from it and more from it. And we keep pouring money, bad money over bad money. Tell me that this is a one-time thing and I might get on board.
Well, keep in mind, it's a one-time thing, but we're not talking about spending anything. All we're saying is, here's an example. And the people on Facebook can see this. I went on the website, and this report's about 6 months old, but the State Investment Council puts out a report every year. And we're actually investing into equity returns, income, or debt-free loan programs in other states. Here's an example. We invested $85 million of our money in the European Real Estate Fund. And I'm sure we're getting a return back of probably 3.5 to 4%, because according to this reports, we're getting about 2.5 to 3% return back on these investments. That's fantastic. But when you look into that European real estate fund, what is that fund doing? That fund is actually investing into condo development in Germany. Not against that. We're probably making about 3-4% return. What I'm saying is if we put $50 million into a real estate fund in the state of New Mexico and created a New Mexico real estate fund, and I'm not talking about the legislature, I'm not talking about the government doing it, I'm talking about the private sector. We invest with the private sector and do it. I can name you thousands of developers in the state that their number one issue on growing their industries here is getting private capital to invest in them.
All right.
So we have to take the lead on this, and that's what we've been pushing.
All right. We'll continue to talk about this back in 1 minute with Jeff Apodaca. It's Turnaround Tuesdays on News Radio KKOB.
Turnaround Tuesdays with Scott Stigler and Jeff Apodaca. Tonight at 5. Brought to you by Indigo Mortgage. Here on News Radio KKOB.
All right, continuing with Jeff Apodaca, and we're talking about this rainy day fund or the land grant fund, $18 billion, third, actually all the savings together, the 5 funds together, $24.4 billion. And you say that's the third largest in the United States?
We have the third largest investment funds in the country, 14 largest investment funds in the world. So to sit there and say New Mexico is poor, we live poor, but we have a lot of money. And so it's kind of like you said earlier, people call it the rainy day fund. Not only are we in the middle of a hurricane and the roof got blown off. So our proposal is we're pushing the gubernatorial candidates. Let's invest back into New Mexico industries. Keep those companies, those middle-sized and the startup companies here, and grow that industry. And then we also think that we can move we think what would be smart is move about $500 million into our community banks and have our community banks lend out low debt interest loans to small businesses, because small businesses, which is 95% of our economy, small businesses have an issue getting private capital to grow.
All right, I went over in our last segment, so we're up against the break here. But when we continue, let's find out where the current governor candidates stand on this and why you have received any blowback on doing what you're suggesting to do. We'll do that with Jeff Apodaca when we continue on News Radio KKOB.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. Invite some of your friends, ask some questions. Joanne, I'm seeing some of your questions already, so thank you so much. We'll be answering some of your guys' questions soon, but thanks again for joining us today for Turnaround Tuesday. We're talking about the $24 billion. Let's invite some of your friends to grow this audience a little bit more online and ask some questions. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
All right, yesterday there was a sort of a town hall type of debate to Steve Pierce and Michelle Lujan Grisham, the candidates for governor in the state of New Mexico. Very cordial. Very cordial.
We actually, New Mexico Dems for Democracy, we're the only ones there that streamed it live on Facebook. So a lot of people saw it on Facebook, thanks to our fellow partners here. So. But yeah, I think it was very cordial, but I think it was some good answers, and I hope they have more forums and more debates.
All right, so tell me where both of these candidates stand on investing. You always worry me about this investing.
I know.
I just see it as spend.
Well, again, what we're talking about is the Constitution. Article 12 says the State Investment Council has the authority to invest our money, and that's what we're saying is let's invest 5% of it. And we did a very unscientific poll on our Facebook page, but over 56% of the people that responded didn't even realize we had this money. Over 56%. 73% think it's a good idea to invest 5% of it that we've been talking about. And over 80% think that we should invest it into biotechnology, renewables, cybersecurity, things like that we're already developing. So when we sat with both gubernatorial candidates, Michelle Lujan Grisham, what she's talking about is following the State Investment Council's policies, what they have in place right now. The State Investment Council can change the rules on how they want to invest it. And what she told me is that she will work with the State Investment Council, Steve Moise, and the board on investing the full funding of the Severance Fund, which is about another $250 million. And we think that's a great start, but that's a little toe in the water when you need to jump into the deep end when you have $3 billion worth of needs. So we don't think that's enough. When we sat and talked to Steve Pierce about it, Congressman Pierce about it, he was much open to it. He was open to, he hasn't committed to the billion, but he definitely is, he's favoring more of $1 billion investment through our community banks, through into startups and technologies. We're very proud that we're even seeing some of his commercials talking about some of this now. And so we're going to continue pushing both of them because we think with second or third highest unemployment in the country, and we know the unemployment's gotten better in the last few months thanks to oil and gas and construction build out. But the high tech jobs we still need to bring, and those are the higher paying jobs that we need to bring here. So, and if you recall the controversy of me showing up to a Steve Pierce meeting a couple of weeks ago, this is what the topic was about investing and talking to 38 business leaders that talked the same talk that we talked about. Is we need to start investing into ourselves, and that's what we talked about.
Don't you dare shake Steve Pierce's hand. Republicans are evil.
I don't think so, but we didn't take a picture last week when we got calls about shaking hands with each other.
Yeah. Well, but Joe Monahan said we were hugging. So I mean, when it gets to a hug, Michelle and Steve Pierce hugged each other.
They did.
Hugged each other.
They hugged each other.
Hugged each other.
So again, what we're proud about is that we have now started pushing the $24 billion, and let's invest some of it here. We actually invest into Oklahoma State bonds, making a 2% return, and I'm not against that. But if we invested it here, make a 2.5% to 3% return, we're also creating jobs.
Jeff Apodaca joining us Turnaround Tuesdays on News Radio KKOB. Back after traffic, weather, and the news.
This is where New Mexico comes to talk. Now on 94.5 FM and AM 770. News Radio KKOB.
All right, continuing with Turnaround Tuesdays with Jeff Apodaca. And by the way, you can call, if you want to call, 243-3333. And also questions on Facebook Live on New Mexico Democrats for Democracy. You got a couple?
I do. Nicole, thank you for tuning in today. And she basically, the question is how do you get around the red tape? Well, that's the thing that we've been arguing about is if we spend the money or you take the money out, like everybody talks about taking the money out of the land grant fund for more education, right? Because that's where some of the money comes from. Yes, it's a constitution. You need a constitutional amendment. You need a legislative approval. But what we're saying is if you look at Article 12 of the state constitution, it basically gives the authority to the State Investment Council. The State Investment Council follows the State Investment Council guidelines. So that's an 11-person board that's appointed and chaired by the governor. So we have talked to lawyers, we've talked to policy people, and really we don't need legislative approval. What we're saying is let's just change some of the investment ways that we want to do it and invest some of those monies here in New Mexico. So Nicole, thanks for the question, but we actually could, the State Investment Council has the authority. Governor Martinez could do this today, and we've had many conversations with her about it.
All right, so I guess the question is then, if we're doing so well, I mean, you even admitted that we're doing a great job in investing this money in Oklahoma and Europe and all these other places, and if we're getting these great returns, why would we want to take a chance on a bad return in New Mexico?
And again, when you look at the State Investment Council report, we lose some investment stuff, but my point is I'm not saying let's take $24 billion. That's crazy. And I'm going to tell you, Steve Moise, the State Investment Council, and then the board has done a great job. They've grown those funds the last 3 to 5, 7 years, 8 to 11% a year. Not against that. But the stock market dropped 20 points. We're going to lose $4 billion overnight. So my point is let's take $1 billion, 5% of our gains. Let's take it off the table and stop investing outside the state. And let's invest some of it inside the state. Yes, we might make a smaller return instead of making a 6 or 8% return. We can make a 2.5 to 3% return, but the job creation and the tax revenue would be a lot more. And Steve Moise and the State Investment Council came out with a report during the campaign in the primary, because I made this an issue, that they have the $150 million or something that they have invested into New Mexico technologies or startups over a 20-year period. It's made a 10% return on the investments. So yes, we might lose some investments, but we lose other investments outside the state. So again, we're not saying let's take it all. Let's just take 5% of it.
All right. And the other thing that you're going to be battling here is corruption. I mean, Bill Richardson used this money to pay for play. right?
Well, that's what you're going to hear sometimes. I don't totally agree with that, but that's what you're going to hear sometimes. And what they did was they brought in, and they right now, Sun Mountain. We have one person that basically manages and allocates the investments out. Sun Mountain, they do a great job. In the past, we've had as many as 10. I believe we need 10 investment groups. But I think what happened in the past is they came in and gave other investments, and these guys invested it outside the state. Yes, there was some investment inside the state. And then later on, you found that there was this pay-for-play stuff, supposedly. What I'm saying is biotechnology. University of New Mexico was one of the leading research universities in biotechnology. We have created so many patents in biotechnology, but when those biotechnology companies they start here and then they leave our state. So what I'm saying is let's create a biotechnology investment fund. There are fund managers around the country. Let's bring them in with, making up a number, $50 million. We put up $50 million. Now we have a $100 million investment fund investing into biotechnology. We can do that across multiple verticals and get that money working here. We actually invest into biotechnology companies in North Carolina, in Philadelphia, outside our state. We need to start investing in some of our own.
Jeff Apodaca joining us here on News Radio KKOB. It's Turnaround Tuesdays. Back with more with him and right after traffic and weather and a brief time out here on News Radio KKOB.
This is where New Mexico comes to talk. Now on 94.5 FM and AM 770. News Radio KKOB.
Continuing Turnaround Tuesdays with Jeff Apodaca here on News Radio KKOB and on Facebook Live, New Mexico Democrats for Democracy. Jeff, I saw a ranking of states based on what they call freedom, and there's a number of measures: fiscal freedom, regulatory freedom, personal freedom, and then overall freedom. New Mexico is ranked 41st, and the reason that they say, and this is done by the Cato Institute, the reason they say is because of our we would be much better off. We were pretty high in personal freedom, but we'd be much better off in economic freedom. And that's sort of what we're talking about right now. They say if we got off of government spending, we got a serious grip on government spending, New Mexico could be one of the freest states in the country.
Well, and again, it's about job creation. I mean, the majority of the jobs we have here are nonprofit, state, or federal jobs. Mm-hmm. And that's what we've been talking about, is we have to stimulate the economy. We have some of the top research laboratories and universities in the country. 10-12% of our industry is agriculture. We do nothing to invest in value-added agriculture. So those are things that we're talking about that we know that grow, the gubernatorial candidates and all the candidates are talking about how we're going to get people out of poverty. How you get people out of poverty? You give them jobs. You get good paying jobs. And that's the number one thing that we've been talking about, is there's no private capital, very little private capital invested into our state. And then we have $24 billion. We don't invest into our state. Then you have some of our pueblos and tribes that sit on billions. They don't invest into our state. So when I was running for governor, what we were talking about is let's all work together, start investing together. Private capital will come. And again, everybody, go look at what Colorado's done, what Austin, Texas has done, Kentucky, North Carolina, Philadelphia. Those are communities that have a lot less resources than we did, and don't invest into tech transfer, don't invest into infrastructure, and don't invest into training, jobs and opportunities. And that's what we're talking about.
One of the things that really frustrates me as living here in New Mexico now for 30 years is that we don't go out of state and look at somebody else and say, there's a success story. Let's just duplicate what they're doing. And I've heard over and over again, and I'm sure you have too, well, we're New Mexico. We're unique. We got different issues here. We can't do what North Carolina did. We can't do what Texas did. Why the heck not?
We can. And in fact, they've done it with a lot less resources. And that's why I was talking to a friend of mine who manages the investment funds in California. And to put in perspective, Stig, we have $24 billion, right? California, sixth largest economy in the world. They have $8 billion, and we sit on $24 billion. And I have a friend that actually manages part of the $8 billion. And we were talking about it. And I said, George, how much money do you think we have? And he says, 2 million people, high unemployment, 500,000 live in poverty, poor state. We have he estimated we had about $450 million. That's what he estimated we had. And when I told him it was 24 billion, he started laughing. And he said, and you have all those problems? So that's the issue, is we just need to start doing things differently, and it starts from the top. So we're going to push our candidates and our gubernatorial candidates. And this is a major topic, because if we can start investing in New Mexico and create jobs, think about this. There are over 750 or 75,000 small businesses in the state of New Mexico, 75,000. Their number one issue that they can't grow is that they can't get capital, and they can't get capital to invest with them. And so our proposal is, let's invest some of that into long-term debt financing through the State Investment Council, through our community banks, and let's work with our community banks who are the experts on business loans and give them low debt finance capital for New Mexico industries. We're doing it outside our state right now. Let's do it inside our state.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of businesses out there that are worthy of that kind of investment. I probably differ with you a little bit on renewables, but we can talk about that. We've got a call that we want to get in, and I'm sure you got another Facebook question. We'll do those when we continue in 60 seconds on News Radio KKOB. Dave, you're on with Jeff Apodaca.
Yeah, Jeff, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but you're totally wrong. The problem with New Mexico is the liberal agenda that's been here for 85 years is running out companies right and left. We can dump more money, but even the founder, the richest man in the world, all right, was from New Mexico, and he wouldn't even put his company here, and it was because of the education system. We keep throwing money at a system that's broken because of the unions, and putting more money into a teacher that's a bad teacher will not correct the problem.
Yeah, but I don't think he's talking. Well, and Dave, let me let him answer.
But I'm talking about the whole agenda and the reason why we're not getting jobs.
Oh, okay.
We don't have the force. We don't have the labor force in New Mexico. Yes, we bring in top scientists and stuff like that, but they come from out of state.
Yeah.
There's very few that are homegrown. We have New Mexico Tech here that brings them in, but other than that, we don't have it. And if we're going to turn this, I agree with Jeff. We've got to come together as a state instead of this manana. And my uncle was the governor of the state of New Mexico, and my philosophies are totally opposite of his. And the good old boy days have got to stop.
Right.
You're talking about California. I was born in Northern California, and they're bankrupt. They're the sixth largest world's economy, but they're bankrupt.
Yeah.
And
all right. So Dave, before we run out of time here, let me let Jeff address that.
Well, Dave, and Dave's right to a point, because by us just investing into New Mexico businesses, we'll keep those here. But at the same time, yes, we're not talking about this right now, but we also have to train New Mexicans for those jobs. Absolutely. That's one of the reasons Intel left. We stopped training New Mexicans for the Intel jobs, and then they're getting penalized because 61% of their employees are supposed to come from New Mexico. So that's, Dave, I agree with you. But the first step we have to do is start getting private capital here investing in our industries. There are enough industries, enough New Mexico employees to start it going, but absolutely, we then have to work with our APS. We have to work with our public schools. We have to work with our community colleges, CNM, UNM's already doing it with the Innovation Academy. We have to start training New Mexico kids for those jobs. But yes, we'll have to bring in some of that C-level executives from outside the state. And also, Dave, once we start investing into ourselves, guess what? The biotechnology firms that are starting in California, hey, let's move to New Mexico because cost of living is less expensive. So
Lifestyle is better.
So what I'm
Weather.
saying, right. What I'm saying is we just have to get the ball rolling. There's nothing going here. So, Dave, I don't disagree with you on some of your points, but I do disagree with other points. But Dave said it's time we all start working together, and hopefully that's what we're doing, Stig, is starting that conversation.
All right, we'll take a quick break here and then come back, finish our time with Jeff Apodaca. Turnaround Tuesdays brought to you by Indigo Mortgage on News Radio KKOB.
This is where New Mexico comes to talk. Now on 94.5 FM and AM 770. News Radio KKOB.
All right, Stig Show with Jeff Apodaca, Turnaround Tuesdays, and also streaming live on Facebook Live, New Mexico Democrats for Democracy. You got another Facebook question there?
Yeah, Desi. Desi said John Arthur Smith. She put it in initials, but John Arthur Smith. John Arthur Smith is a senator. Actually, him and I get along pretty well. He's a pretty moderate conservative senator, a Democratic senator from Deming. He's the chairman of the Finance Committee. Any changes, any expenditures that we want to do has to go through his committee. So the number one question I get is, how are you going to get that through John Arthur Smith and the chairman of the Finance Committee when he has said publicly, well, Apodaca's plan's a good idea. Maybe we'll do it when we get to 40 billion. Because their mindset is, let me protect this money, and I'm not against completely that. But again, I've talked to policy attorneys. I've talked to the State Investment Council board members that will talk to me. If the State Investment Council agrees to it, we can change some of the policies to invest in New Mexico. So again, we're not spending the money, we're reallocating the money into spending in New Mexico. And so we believe, and I've talked to policy attorneys, and by the way, both gubernatorial candidates agree with me. They just don't want to say it. They agree with me that our plan is doable with the State Investment Council. But yes, you have to have the votes. There's 11 of them. You got to get 6 of the votes.
Yeah. All right. Final thought on economy, and then next week we're going to do crime and prison reform.
I think both gubernatorial candidates have a good plan on the economy. Both are talking about it. We're very proud that, and thanks to our 38,000 followers in New Mexico Democrats for Democracy. But one of the major issues that the states and the economies, you can talk about all the different things that are going on, job training, education, lifestyle, but the number one issue that brings companies and grows your own companies is capital. And we sit on $24 billion. So we'll continue pushing on behalf of our voters, our supporters, and the people that are supporting our platform. And we start doing that, we're going to start investing. Think about this, 75,000 companies, if they got capital to expand their business and every one of them just hired one New Mexican, that's 75,000 people. We're getting back to work. So, and then Stig, if anybody wants to follow us, New Mexico D for D's. Now, I did a video during the primary campaign about how we can do it, and by moving $1 billion into New Mexico, the returns and the investments. We'll post that video on New Mexico Democrats for Democracy and on my Facebook page. Take a look at that, and people will see how constitutionally we can do this.
All right. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
Just don't let Bill Richardson have the money. Back after this.